Well, welcome everybody to the District 26 Pathways training. I am pleased to be your MC for the evening. I am James Gable. I am the D26 Program Quality Director for this year, and I am happy to have along with me Keith Horowitz, primary trainer. I like that name. We didn't pick the name, but you picked it. Nice choice, Keith. I love that. So Keith will be our primary trainer for today. We also have Karen helping out as well. Both of them are on the education team this year. Keith is the education chair, and Karen is our DTM chair, which we're very excited to have this year. So you'll hear a portion from her a little bit later. So the plan for tonight is this. Why are we here? We got to understand the why. We're here to understand maybe pathways a little bit deeper. If you've been involved in it for a while, then there's always new things that we can learn. So my goal for everybody here, or my challenge for everybody here, is leave with one thing. Sometimes pathways can have so many parts and pieces to it, and maybe everybody here is at different levels of where they're at in that process. But if you leave with one thing, that's what I always ask people to do. You don't have to remember it all, but if you leave with one thing and apply it, then you are better than you were yesterday in that. So I challenge you to do that. Take some notes. There's going to be plenty of times for questions and answers. So if you leave with questions, it's your fault, because we're going to get plenty of time for you guys to ask questions. And we're here also beyond this to provide, via email. We'll share our emails with you, so you'll be able to jump on and, ask us any other questions moving forward with that. So I'm so glad to have everybody here tonight. And without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Keith Horowitz. Keith, why don't you start us off with a little introduction for yourself? And well, you know what? Let me map out where we're going first, and maybe a little bit of ground rules. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, I encourage you to throw them into the chat. And then if we can find time to squeeze it into the presentation, I can ask Keith and run them through. Maybe I'll have you to step up to the virtual stage, and then maybe you can ask that question yourself. But there will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. I really would love everybody to interact within the chat. If you think of something that adds to, or is even a question or is additive, throw it in the chat so everybody else can learn, because everybody here collectively, we are smarter than each of us individually, and smarter than 100 people. And I think there's about 15 here, so we are smarter than 100 people collectively. So share your wisdom, share it with us. If you've got some ideas, pop them in there, and we'll pop those up and share them with everybody. So use that for the interaction, ask your questions, and our plan for you is to leave with something. Now, Keith, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Yes, this evening I am going to be your primary trainer. That means you're going to hear my voice a lot, but that doesn't mean my voice is the only thing you should be hearing. I should be hearing other people's questions as we go through and seeing how other people react. I am Keith Horowitz. I've been in a Toastmaster since 2011. I had 2 DTMs in the Classic program. I'm working on a Pathways DTM. I am in a number of clubs, including Speak Leaders, and this year I am honored to be the district's education chair. And tonight we are going to be talking about pathways, and I'll get a level set from everybody in a couple of minutes. But I want to let you know my thoughts going into this is that we have lots of people in our Toastmasters district who either haven't chosen a path in Pathways or just not sure what to do in Pathways, don't know how to get their levels completed, don't know what it means to complete a level. And we know that we have lots of great leaders here, but sometimes they need a little extra perspective on how to help all of our brand new members and all of our members who need that extra information to really get them going on this. My idea was, let me start out with going back through what it means to choose a path. A lot of us, well, I know for me, I had forgotten what it was like to choose a path, even though I've gone through a number and I've bought a number over the time. Sometimes it's hard to find exactly where to start from again because it's been so long, and Toastmasters only sets it up to say, hey, you need a path when you first sign up. And being able to know what it's like to tell somebody when they first get into Toastmasters how to sign up, well, that can be important too, because we have those different pieces. So quick question for those who I can see on the camera. How many of you are familiar with how to tell people where to start when they first join Toastmasters? How many of us? Okay, pretty much everybody. Therefore, my best slides that I got together for this are going to be something I can go through much faster because most of you remember exactly how to do it. But I still think it's important. So I'm going to go through these slides quickly so you have a refresher on what it's like to think about Toastmasters as a brand new member. And I'm trying a new product called Prezi. That's a web-based product that lets you do a different type of slideshow here. So the first thing we tell the new member after we get their membership application and we've put them in, whether they're going to pay for themselves or we got their payment information got in, we're going to have them log in to Toastmasters.org. So the first time they go in, they're going to want to click that login button that's way up at the top there. And they're not going to have a password yet. So they're going to have to use that first time logging in, which, by the way, goes to the same place as the forgot password. So if you forget your password, that's the same idea. Two different links that go to the same place to get people started. Once they do that, then we're going to have them log into Toastmasters.org. And that's going to take them to their homepage. And it says, where are we going to take you today? Well, we might want to tell them that they need to go to the education programs. The truth is, there's some nice icons now right on that first home screen. But if you click around a little bit and click Toastmasters back, you don't necessarily come to your home screen. So we'll talk about that a little later. But you can always tell them they can go to the education programs tab, and they might have to scroll around a little bit to find what they want in that case. But it's all in that same long page, including when they want to choose their first path or if they want to choose a second path. So we're going to take them in and they're going to have an option if they want to access Basecamp on that page, but we're going to go further down and at the bottom there, choose a path. 11 engaging options, at least for a little longer. We've already heard that Pathways is going to be upgraded and tuned up and given a new name, and we're going to get to the best paths and leave behind some of the paths that aren't as appreciated. All right, so when you first go in and you're saying, I want to choose a path, then you have to pick your language. I think most of us are going to be picking English. I have no judgment if you choose a different language. How would you like to access your materials? Well, we no longer have the option of asking them to send printed materials, so the only choice is, yes, digital resources. Woohoo! Then there are the two options. You can view all the options, or you can take an assessment. I think it's always interesting to see, how does Toastmasters assess me this time? Because my answers vary depending on my point of view. And I think it's always interesting to see what they recommend. Sometimes I take their recommendations. Sometimes I choose something different. If we're going to do the assessment, once again, we've got our English. We get started. And we start answering a whole bunch of questions. It could take 5-10 minutes, depending on how much thought you put into it. But I'll remind any of our new members that they don't necessarily have to worry about picking the exact right answer, because at the end, they get to choose any of the paths they want. They're not locked into the recommendation. Therefore, they don't have to stress so much about that survey at the beginning. So you might check a few things and move all the way through, and by the time you're done, it recommends certain paths. And maybe you want to learn a little bit more. Well, we've got these nice little links at the bottom they can click to open up and see, oh, that's what effective coaching is about. That's not bad. And there are even ways that they can see some more of the projects, but it doesn't always give us every piece of information. And I'll talk about another way you can help them out, and that's in the agenda version as well. But if you've chosen, let's say, visionary communication as your first path or your next path, if you're continuing on, and you continue, and eventually it winds up in a special version of the cart, and there's the cost. Well, that's most of the cost, except now paths also have taxes. It's about $1.64, I think, in Colorado added, so it's $21.64, and that's going to be something that they will pay for if they're buying in a subsequent path. We all know that that first $20 to get them into Toastmasters includes their first path. So that $20 won't count. They should not see that, or if they do, you can let them know, by the way, that $20 is not charged to you. It winds up being free at the end. And then you want to be able to go to Basecamp to get started. And that's where my beginning slides for somebody who's brand new to Toastmasters needs to know where they're going, or when we want to tell them, hey, you want to get into the system and get started. And maybe once you get down a little bit, you'll even want a second path. And I see I've got a question.
Yes, Keith, you tossed out an interesting tickler, which was that Pathways is changing names and some paths are going to be, you didn't use the word defunct, but that's my takeaway. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I won't say truly defunct, because what they've told us is that anybody who's currently using one of the paths that is going away will still be able to do it for quite some time. So they're not eliminating and saying, too bad, sorry, you'll have to start over on a different path. No, they're saying you got your path, you're going to be able to continue, but you're not going to get the new experience. And the new experience sounds like it's going to be worthwhile thinking about jumping into it pretty soon.
So do we know which paths those are, so we can advise people to choose elsewhere and not those?
I've heard it and I don't remember it off the top of my head. Let me see if I can Google that real fast.
Okay.
Unless Karen has it.
Well,
Or we
Keith
can
is
follow up after. I mean,
I'll take that.
Karen.
Okay.
Go, Karen.
I was just gonna say I'll take that so you can continue your presentation.
Ah, okay.
But Nancy might know.
Nancy, tell us what you know. Nancy, I need you to unmute, please.
Nancy, you're on mute.
I know. Give me a minute and I'll find it. I'll get back with you, okay? So,
thank you.
yes.
All right, so we got two volunteers in a race
All
to get the
Let me make
information.
Let me make one. Yeah, that's a race. Let me make one comment, Keith, real fast. In that, what they're doing is changing the learning platform. Currently, they're using Cornerstone. You'll see it in the bottom of the platform, and so the platform's changing. That's why the look is changing. They're not changing the content at this point. The content is going to. They've changed it a little bit already last year, but the content will be the same. They've chose the most popular paths, and we'll have that. They're already up there in the chat. So they've chosen that, but it's going to be a better experience, as Keith was saying, with this different platform. And so everybody knows the expectations will be the same working through the pathways.
Thank you.
All right, so that's what it's like for a new person to just get started with choosing their path and getting started in Pathways. Then we have to get them back onto the site, back into the system, and start using Pathways. And that means having them jump into their selected path. And I'm going to share my screen again because this thing's got lots of good visual stuff going on here. There we go. When they first get into their Basecamp, they have the Paths and Learning Education Transcript, which is a great way to look through when you have lots of different things. But if you have 3 or less, you can just jump down to your thing and go right to the open curriculum. And it's really important to remind new users that that open curriculum is the important thing, because if they come in this way, they're going to have to make sure they're clicking the open curriculum button and not the blue link that says the path that they want, because the open curriculum is how they're going to get into the data that they need. And when they get in level 1 icebreaker, one of the things I tell people about icebreakers is not to try and think about this is meeting somebody else's expectations in the club or in Toastmasters. An icebreaker should be your own personal level set. What skills do you have coming into Toastmasters? And I like to tell them, think about this speech as being the most direct speech that you have, because it's something you and you alone should know best, and that's about yourself. Share just a little bit about yourself, 4 to 6 minutes, give us an idea of who you are, and whatever you do will be fantastic, and you get to learn where you're going to grow from here. So being able to do that icebreaker is great. And then if you get a chance to do a second path, you get to do another icebreaker. Some people think, oh, another icebreaker? Why do I have to do that? Well, guess what? Most likely you're not doing it just a couple of weeks later and there have been a lot of new people in your club, or maybe you've just learned a bunch going through your first path and you want to be able to retry what you did in your icebreaker, redo some of the stuff you did, or maybe share a different perspective and see how that flows to be able to understand. So we get to do the icebreaker at the beginning of every path. And then we get to do writing a speech with purpose, introduction to vocal variety and body language, and then the trickiest project in probably all of Pathways, because it isn't one speech, it isn't two speeches, it's two speeches and an evaluation 3 times at a meeting that people have to keep in mind. And telling a new person that they have to do these 2 different things, and yes, it's called the first speech and the second speech, but it's really your 4th and 5th speech if you've done the projects in order. But the idea is the first and second speech, it's a first speech, any topic, any style you want, 5 to 7 minutes, go for it. And then you're going to give a second speech. That second speech is going to use something that you heard to try differently from the first speech. You don't have to do the same speech, but lots of people choose to refine the same speech and work on those skills to be able to move forward with that. And being able to share that as an important step is really good to be able to do. And then giving somebody else an evaluation. Well, that's pretty straightforward. We should be able to give an evaluation. It's nice if we've read this project already, but I've seen people come into Toastmasters already with the ability to give good feedback on speeches. Therefore, we want to give them that opportunity and not tell them, well, you can only do it in this order. No, if you've done an evaluation and you've gotten that written feedback, fantastic. You've already covered that. If not, we'll make sure that we get that on your agenda so that we get you in a meeting to evaluate somebody else and make sure that somebody, and I usually like to recommend the general evaluator do this, fill out that feedback paper for that person giving the evaluation. And I'm going to stop share because I see hands up and I bet people have information going. What do you got for us, Nancy? You're still on mute, Nancy. Because I think you're trying to share that key information about what Pathways is turning into. So we want to get you on the screen. There we go.
Okay.
Tell us,
Okay.
Nancy.
Yes, so the paths that are being dropped are effective coaching, innovative planning, leadership development, strategic relationships, and team collaboration. So I've already gone in and bought 2 of those that I want to work on. So it's a good idea to let your clubs know. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nancy. And I see Sarah's got a hand up. Sarah.
Hi. Yes, so actually it's 2 questions. The first
Please.
one is I saw, so on the evaluation, like the speech, evaluation speech, that project, can you use one of your previous, can you use one of your like if you were to use your speech with a purpose as your 5 to 7 minute speech, get the evaluation, and then do the second, redo that same speech again, would that all count or does it have to be separate?
They're expecting 2 speeches that are not counted from a prior speech. So you'll want to do a speech for 5 to 7 minutes. Now, if you really like the speech you did with writing for a purpose and you want to tune that up while you continue to grow it, you could give it 2 more times. A lot of people think, oh my goodness, people are going to get bored hearing the exact same speech over and over. But if you tell them you're working on this specifically for these skills, most clubs are very understanding along those ways. And I'll tell you, if you're working on it for a purpose, like you're going to do a work presentation or you're working on a contest speech, oh, that's a great reason to do it more than once.
Okay.
And you had a second part.
Yes, so my second question was related to pathways changing. For example, my pathway right now is strategic relationships. once those changes happen, I know that the first pathway is included in your like cost of membership. Is if my pathway goes away and I potentially need to switch to a new pathway, will I to like pay,
They're
or
not-
does it
Yeah, they're not going to take away the path you're working on. I don't know whether they're going to keep us in the old system or whether they're going to import it to the new system but not update it. That wasn't completely clear to me. We'll be learning more about that and definitely sharing that information out when we find it. But we do know from International, they're not just going to cut off any of the old paths. So anybody who's currently working, I'm sure they'll give us quite some time to work through our existing paths. And I hope so, because I've got a few out there that are going to go away.
Thank you.
Mark's got a question.
Yes, thank you. I joined a little late. I got back later than I expected. I'm a lapsed Toastmaster. I think I made it to the ATM Gold, but that was pre-Pathways for the most part. And I was out during the COVID period for probably a couple of years. I'm just coming back now, and I really am not real familiar or comfortable with the Pathways system, which is why I joined tonight. The Path 1 that you were just showing us seems like an excellent starting point to me for a new member, but for somebody who's gone through the process a number of times, it seems like it would be rehashing old ground. Is that always required, or could you opt out of that? And the other thing I'm just wondering is, let me leave it at that for now. Sorry.
That's a great question. I've certainly heard that from a lot of people wondering, why do we have to do the same things over again? But I'll tell you, as somebody in the prior system who did 16 CCs, I am very happy to go back through the basics again, because it allows me to do more advanced speeches, but think about one or two key things that I'm just going to continue to tune in the way I present. And you can always say, hey, look, this is my icebreaker. It's 4 to 6 minutes. The last time I did that project, I did it as a 10 to 12 minute speech because I wanted to share a lot more content. As long as there's time in your club's agenda, think about how you can always do a little bit longer. And well, now that I've mentioned doing a longer speech, I want to share one of the things that I've learned that's important when you're doing those longer speeches. And that's the fact that they don't tell you this, but the 5 to 7 minutes is very important for us understanding in our heads when we're at the point where we need to re-engage with the audience. And by re-engage, I mean, if you've been speaking about 5 minutes, that little green bulb's gone off in your head, and you're doing a 20-minute speech, this is a great time to stop and do something different that'll get the audience's attention. Maybe you're asking for questions. Maybe you're just looking around the room with a big pause and making eye contact while people soak in what you said and transition to a new subtopic. So being able to take that 5-minute chunks at a time is why we do so much with the 5 to 7. But we also always have that opportunity to do it longer when we feel like we've got more content to share, as long as we're being fair to our club. Anything else, Mark?
Yeah, I did think my second question related to what you were just covering about repeating a speech a second time. I know that seemed like a new assignment with Pathways. I don't remember ever seeing that done previously, but a lot of people said, as you did, that it's an excellent exercise that you can actually see a lot of improvement and learn a lot of things trying to incorporate that feedback. Is that discouraged for regular speeches? Because a lot of people seem to really praise that exercise.
I'm not sure I know what you mean by discouraged for regular speeches.
Well, you said there's a sort of a drawback of asking a club to hear the same speech twice. And I can see that. I think that's kind of valid. But, you know, the people who have done that claim that it's really been beneficial to them. And a lot of people seem to think it would make sense to do that routinely for a lot of your speeches.
Right.
Not
Yeah,
just that one exercise.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that For me personally, I try not to repeat the same speech in the same club unless I have a specific purpose for repeating it. I always try and change things up and only repeat a speech I did a long time ago in a different club, in a new club. But I do believe that there is absolute value in repeating the same speech, and I don't think any club should discourage that. And I think most people just in their own heads think, I shouldn't do that. But the truth is, why not? Go ahead. This is the place to try it out. To me, Toastmasters is like your virtual driving environment for speeches. It's a place where you get to try out different skills, and you can try something new and different when you're in a simulator. Even though it's still real life, it's real life with our friends in Toastmasters clubs.
Thank you.
Karen.
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on a couple of Mark's questions there, and it all wraps up to me as with pathways. I always tell folks in my clubs that pathways should work for you. You shouldn't work for pathways. What I mean by that is similar to what Keith said. My first icebreaker, I did 4 to 6 minutes. The second icebreaker that I did, because I'm starting my second path, I want to incorporate more and more things that I've learned over my Toastmasters journey. So maybe I want to ask for a little bit more time. And then the same thing with giving the same speech multiple times. Again, it's not a matter of, I need this speech to fit this bubble. I want to incorporate things I'm thinking about and learning about into my speeches, but I'm going to make my speech fit for what I need it to do in the long term, if that makes more sense.
Yep, definitely. Thanks, Karen. Was there something else, Mark?
No, I appreciate that information, and I'm hoping there's flexibility in the pathways because I think we all have sort of different priorities and different goals. So, thanks much.
Yep, well, they definitely made pathways a lot more flexible when they first rolled it out. We have the choice to move around paths, and we have the ability to mold the things that we're working on at least a little bit to what's going on in our pathways, especially at the earlier levels. I love the earlier levels for being able to do any kind of speech. When you start getting into the projects like doing a podcast, well, that's got a very specific challenge before you get to the point of doing the speech on it. But there are more than one way to approach even the podcast. If you approached it from thinking about, well, what am I trying to learn? What is my experience here? And I've seen a few different approaches on that kind of thing. So, Mark, if we've answered your question, I'll let you put your hand down there.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that.
No worries. All right. What I want to cover next, probably most of you already know, but I think it's worth looking at and talking through, and that's how people mark a level complete, because that's the next big challenge for our newer members. And that's when they get done with a level and they've got all the other pieces clicked complete and they got the little check marks, it's time to do the level 1 completion or whatever level they're up to. And they're going to click that button that first says activate. And it immediately turns into a button that says launch. And you click the button that says launch, and it opens up in another tab with the PDF that just shows you a picture of going back to that same button again that now says mark complete. And once they do mark complete, then that gets sent to the Basecamp manager or whoever's set up as the contact for the club on Toastmasters.org. Therefore, what I always recommend to my members is, just to be sure, when you mark a level complete and you're waiting for that level to be approved so that you get that level completion notice, is let your Basecamp manager know. If it's your vice president of ed or one of the backups, which is the president or the secretary, just send them a quick note or a text or an IM or something just to let them know, by the way, you have a level approval out there. And most of the time, if we're lucky, they're going to say, oh, yeah, I saw that. And sometimes they're going to say, oh, I never got the email. Thanks for letting me know. That happens more often than we'd like. So it's always a good idea to double check with your Basecamp manager of your club to find out if they got it. And just real quick, I want to tell you, if you're in more than one club, whatever club you logged into last is the one that's going to get that Basecamp approval. And if you let your Basecamp manager of another club know, by the way, I want you to have it, they're not going to see it because it went to that club. And I've been having a real problem with Pathways just recently, where if I've put it in and I realize, wait, no, that's got to go to a different club, I have that Basecamp manager disapprove it, and I try and switch clubs. It says I'm switched, but then it puts it back to the same Basecamp manager. It doesn't change clubs properly. So if you do have that situation where you're not sure which club you're logged into, go out, wait a day, go back in, and that usually seems to fix it, waiting a day. I hate that as a solution, but at least it's a solution. All right, so we talked about completing levels. So I've completed up to number 5 on my agenda. Any other thoughts or questions before I move to looking ahead at levels 2 through 5? Not hearing anything. That's good news. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. I had people asking me all the time, I'm having trouble deciding which path I want to do. And I don't even understand the difference. I know I've got 30 days to choose again, but what does that mean? Well, first of all, if you do have somebody talking about the 30 days, 2 things to know about that. Number 1, if they've been in Pathways in your club, they probably haven't even gotten past level 1 in 30 days, which means they're going to see the exact same thing because level 1 is identical through all the paths. So the only way they would know within 30 days that there was a change they wanted would be if they looked way ahead into their paths, which is certainly a possibility, and I certainly recommend it to anybody. The other thing to keep in mind is the 30 days, if you want that, there's no button to click. You have to find the email address to send at International Member Services or Fulfillment or whatever that email address is, and email them and say, I want to change my path, not refund, but change the path. So you can ask to have it changed to a different path. But if you've already done a couple of speeches, you might be starting over at that point. Not that you couldn't take the evaluations you had from them and mark them off, because that certainly is possible. You just want to double check that your Vice President of Education is aware that you're doing it that way. Looking ahead to levels 2. Level 2, we have 3 requirements depending on which path we're in. So if we're in strategic relationships, we're going to be doing understand your leadership style, cross-cultural understanding, and everybody gets to do introduction to Toastmasters mentoring, where you're not supposed to talk about the project as a whole, but you're supposed to give a quick idea of what Toastmasters mentoring view is and give a story of a time you were a protege, somebody else was your mentor. And it doesn't always have to be a formal mentor situation. And we get to do that, and that unlocks a side path, a side quest for some people, where you can be doing the mentoring side path and get those different activities done being a mentor for somebody else. Level 3 projects. Depending on which one you're in, you've got lots of different requirements here. And then you have to do 2 of these electives. Lots of great electives through here. And, oh, why are these A, B, and C, and D here? Oh, because depending on which path you took, you might have been required to do them in level 2, and you can't do them in level 3. Okay, why not? We can do it that way. We've got our electives. Connect with storytelling. That's a great one. Being a table topics leader. Did you know that the active listening project means you get credit for being the table topics master as long as you can show active listening and get that evaluation filled out?
Can I add a little thing here on level 3 and level 4?
Yeah, please.
As I've been working with multiple Toastmasters over my several years, I have a lot of people that look at these electives and they just want to do all of them because they are all just so intriguing and there's so many different skill sets to learn and gain from these electives. But if you'll notice on this chart that Keith is showing here, the same electives are offered almost across the board for every single path that you may choose. So when I coach people on their electives, as I say, pick the 2 that are relevant to what you are working on right now. I will have people that get stuck on level 2 and level 3 because they just want to keep giving these elective speeches, but you want to save some for your next path, and then your next path is, you can definitely, do more if you want, but just be aware that you're not going to get a whole new set of options when you go back on your second or third path. It's going to be the same set of options. And you want to make sure that you're branching out and being strategic about which ones you're choosing and not go through all of them at your first pathway, if that makes sense.
Yep. And that's a good point. That's one of the tips that I give, is about when you get to level 4 and level 5, some of those take a lot more time to figure out what you're going to talk about, may even require you to do a bunch of work. You might have to be a club officer for 6 months, so that's not going to happen right away. Or you might have to get some 360s, or find a time when your club, or maybe a visiting club that you can go visit, will let you do a longer speech without impacting them. Those things can take longer to get done, and when you get to the high performance leadership project, well, that can take a whole lot longer to figure out what you're doing and go through. It's a great project to do the first time, absolutely. And because those take longer, a lot of people will seem to get stalled out. And what I say, that's the time when you start your second path, or even a third path, because that way, while you're working on those other activities, you can be continuing to give your speeches in your club and work on your skills that you're trying to work on from the lower level paths again. So I think once you get even a little bit way down that first path, you start getting level 3 or 4, sure, open up a second path. That way you have plenty of options when it's time to be a speaker in the club. And then for the level 4, you only have to do 1 required and 1 elective. Level 5, also 1 required and 1 elective. And when you finally finish all of those, it unlocks the Reflect on Your Path speech. That's a 10 to 12 minute speech. But guess what? If you've been keeping track of your speeches and your evaluations, you're going to know all the different things that you covered while you were growing in this path. And just that can be a big part of your content, is just giving a summary of those things that you covered and learned while you're doing that path. Let's see, how we doing here? Everybody on board? Any questions now? All right.
All right. Yes, Keith.
Go ahead.
One question, and maybe you're coming up on this, but we have such an amazing, talented group here of experienced Toastmasters. So I'm curious, you mentioned the high performance leadership projects, which we see in the past, but you also mentioned becoming a DTM. You have to, part of that is finishing 2 paths. And then when you go to the DTM requirements, there's a DTM project. What's the difference between a DTM project and a high performance leadership project? For example, can you chair a contest to qualify for one of those, do a different contest for the other?
That's a great question. And I think that's part of Karen's bit about the Pathways DTM. If not, we can cover it early. What do you think, Karen?
Oh, we can wait.
I've
I'm
never
sorry.
done a comparison to find out what the main differences are between a high performance leadership and a DTM project. I've never done a comparison chart on those. So if you know that off the top of your head, Keith, feel free to answer this question. Nancy knows it.
Basically, the difference is with the DTM project, you do not have a committee work. How's that? So
okay.
in the HPL, you have a committee for your project, and you have a committee that works with you on the project. So they oversee what you're doing, and then you have your team to work with the project. In the DTM project, you don't have anybody overseeing. So the idea is, if you've done the HPL within the path, by now, if you're close to getting your DTM, you're able to do that on your own with just your team and nobody watching over you. Is that a good way to explain that? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That's
Yep.
a great
Yep.
clarification.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really good, Nancy. And the one thing I'd say is you would at least have 1 person over you. Your vice president of education would need to sign off on that. So they'd at least know what you're doing to be able to do it. But to me, what I've learned is the difference, and I mostly go back to the classic HPL versus the capstone, DTM capstone project. The HPL is more about putting together a project where you're working on leadership. And that project can be any project you'd like, as long as you're getting a chance to do some sort of leadership and getting some perspective what it's like to be a leader, not necessarily succeeding at the project. If your project is to collect 20,000 socks to give away and you only collect 8,000 of them, all right, it didn't hit the level that you wanted, but you still learned a lot in leadership to be able to collect 8,000 socks. That's really good. So that's the high performance leadership. And you've got your team that you work with, and you've got your committee. And sometimes you might even have somebody on both sides helping you out there. And the idea is not for you to do all the work yourself. Whereas for me, what I've read in the capstone project is that's supposed to benefit an organization. And obviously Toastmasters is a great place to benefit, to give some sort of benefit, to be able to help run something, to help put together something, to chair something. That would be a great way to take that and get some learnings from that. But it kind of implies maybe not necessarily succeeding, but definitely having something to show that, yes, there was a benefit from it. So to me, that's the main thing I've learned as the difference. What's that?
Oh, it should be something that is specific and measurable in terms of its benefit to an organization.
And James just added a little bit in the chat there. I'm going to call him out. Free tip on HPL ideas, sock collecting.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And the one thing I do know is somewhere hidden in the bylaws of clubs is that we're not supposed to necessarily be using the Toastmasters name as working for benefiting another organization directly, unless Toastmasters has set that up. So we've got the Rotarian connection, but other than that, we've got a little bit of limitations about how much we should be making it a club action that does benefiting this other organization. But you personally, absolutely, and you can certainly be having lots of Toastmasters helping you. James.
Yeah, I'd love to add in there, and I'm a member of a corporate club. It's certainly acceptable to take your HPL, which is a challenge, and use it for something within your own company. I did for my HPL, we created a presentation with some of our junior employees, and we presented to a subcontractor on lean construction. And not only did we build a lot of team camaraderie, but we also developed their skills, and we had a great deliverable product to do it. So you can use it within your own organization as well. You don't necessarily even have to be in a corporate club, but you don't have to use it just within, you know, the club itself. So there's so many opportunities to grow your career through that HPL, and that's the whole purpose of it. And so I just wanted to add that in there. And then also warn those that are going to be on your HPL committee what a 360-degree evaluation is, because I did not warn the team. And then I'm like, here, evaluate me. And it's very thorough. It's very well put together by Toastmasters, but it really requires, and they're even built with great open-ended questions in there that really require people to think deeply about your leadership. So be prepared for, you know, some good feedback, but on the other side, prepare them, because it is not something that you can, it's not like giving an evaluation at a speech. It's going to take some time. And fortunately for me, my team was very thoughtful and spent a lot of time giving some great feedback, but that was something that I didn't warn them about. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks, James. And there's one more secret in there about that capstone project, and that's where and how you get a capstone project. It turns out after you've completed all of one path and you've gotten through level 3 of a second path, you can email International and ask them for that capstone project to be added to your transcript in Pathways. All right, any other thoughts on those ideas there? I still see a hand up, but I think that's left over from an open question. No worries. All right. And how many people know the connection between base camp level completions and the Distinguished Club program? in Club Central? Jean, Karen, Amanda, Carolyn, who wants to give me an answer? Somebody who hasn't given an answer yet. Amanda, you want to give it a shot?
Hi, I'm assuming that you mean that you have to go into Club Central and submit the award for the level completion, and then that's what shows up for your club's goals.
Yep, absolutely. It's as simple as that, but it's also as complex as that, because you've logged into Toastmasters, you've gone over to Basecamp, you've approved a level, and wait a second, Toastmasters.org isn't that little click there. You have to either log out or start a new tab and go back over to Toastmasters and go down to where you go to Leadership Central and Club Central and then pull that person up, and then, oh, look, now their level 2 is available. And wait a second, they asked for a level 3. Why is that? Oh, they never completed level 2. So I've approved a level 3, but they have to do level 2 before we can put those in Club Central. So one of those tips and tricks, sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and we got to make sure we double check our people and let them know what they're doing. And of course, we've got all those hidden reports and pathways. I don't want to go into them right now because that's sort of an advanced Basecamp topic, but I will talk about the idea of being able to look through and see where people are at and figure out, oh, by the way, I see you're only one speech away from being able to get that level 3 that we still need for the Distinguished Club program. Can I get you on the agenda in the next few weeks or next couple of months to make sure we hit that Distinguished Club level?
Keith, we are near, thanks so much. We are at the point where we definitely want to have some questions, but we have not heard from Karen in regards to DTM Pathways, so I wanted to steer that direction. I will say this, we will have questions and answers, time for that, and we're certainly welcome to stay on after. But Karen, please tell us a little more about the DTM in Pathway.
Thank you so much, James. I put the website out on the chat here for everybody. This is straight off of District 26. The DTM in the Pathways curriculum is 2 learning paths, and we've talked all about those, about maybe when to launch that second one when you're not quite finished with your first one. And then you've got your club officer requirements, 2 6-month terms or 1 annual term. And let me go ahead and actually get this pulled up here for everyone while I'm reading it aloud. All right. One thing that I think was interesting too is that we do have the participation in a club success plan. I hope all of our clubs are doing that annually, but if not, make sure your club officers do get together and fill out that club success plan. And of course, attend district clubs officer training, which we're going to start having those pop up in the next few months. So take a look for those. We also have the district leader, and then you have your act as a club mentor or club coach. And I always like to think about number 4 as the helping a club with the day-to-day fundamentals, whether that's a brand new club where they're just learning the ropes, or a club coach is helping one that may be struggling. And let's go back to those fundamentals. Let's make sure that we're doing all those things to make the club be good. I don't know what happened to my brain just now. Then level 5 is successfully acting as a club sponsor. And this is, I think we talked about earlier about Speechcraft or youth leadership program as alternatives to being a club sponsor, because I know we had a chat before this session about that's harder to do. Maybe a Speechcraft or a youth leadership program would be a better solution for you. And then, as we've talked about, and I do see your hand, Nancy, the last one here is that DTM project. And right here, it does outline exactly when you can and who you should email when you're ready to get that DTM project added to your Basecamp. Nancy.
Yes. If you want to be a club coach, next Thursday, I think it's 6 to 7, I believe. You can go to the D26 website and sign up for that. If you want to be a coach, we'll be doing training and talking about the process for doing that and the paperwork that's involved. Next week, October 19th. Yeah. Okay. So,
Excellent plug. Thank you. Those are the 6 steps for a DTM in the Pathways. And I don't know if you put my email address on the agenda, but I'll throw it in chat. I am, as James mentioned, the DTM chair this year, and I am here to support you or any of your members if they have additional questions or concerns or just want to chat through some ideas. I'm always here, and I can also help with that bridge between you want to be a club mentor, but where do you even go? How to get started? I can help with that as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Karen. And she's doing a great job as the chair for DTM. It's really something that we felt was important this year to talk about the benefits of that. And then ties right into Pathways, as you can tell. It's a direct tie within there. And Karen is a great guide. We kind of debated on the name. Are you a DTM guide? Are you a chair? But either way, she's here to help guide as the chair of the DTM to help, like she said, fill in those gaps. And everyone who has that DTM on the end of their name is here to help as well too. It's an amazing group of individuals. There's some on this call who once you hit that level, you want to help others, you want to give back. But we still have some time for question and answers. Keith, you did a great job facilitating through questions during it and still keeping within time, so that's why I let you go a little bit over, but we're not at the end of where we're at. So if there's some other questions, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you up to the stage. I've got a couple of earmarked for Keith if we don't see any hands raised very quickly. And I'm going to jump into one. I see a hand. Oh, you got spared, Keith. Carolyn, go ahead. The virtual lectern is yours.
Okay, thank you. The question I have, after looking through Keith's chart and definitely looking through all the paths, I'm currently working on my second path. I'm up to level 4 in the second path, and that's where I do get stumped because all those projects are really dull and boring. And I'm retired. I don't have a corporation, a company, anywhere to do any of these leadership projects. So it's really frustrating to me. And I don't know how many times I can talk to my club about my leadership style, my communication style, mentoring experience. It just seems like it's so repetitive and it's very hard to come up with really good topics for speeches. So I want to tap your brains, all of you guys that have been doing this for a while. What are some creative approaches that you're taking to make your speeches fun and entertaining and, they don't put everybody in the club to sleep?
James has got an answer, but he's on mute, so we don't hear him.
I've got my hand up. If I can jump in, this is Jean.
Yeah.
And I think you
James.
meant level 2. I'm totally with you. You almost want to commit Harry Carey when every member gets up and talks about their communication style and the leadership and that section. So going around multiple times, my latest leadership speech was a takeoff on Rocky and Bullwinkle. I actually profiled Boris Batinov and Natasha and all of that and the different leadership styles and what they exhibited. But that is really stretching it. But that's just one way to just really think differently and get through the project.
Good.
Yeah, I think anything that you can take from life or even fiction and just connect it. If you want to talk about the different leaders in Star Trek as your leadership style and how you connect or don't agree with some of those, you can have fun with it. And I love the idea of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And hey, Rocky, watch me pull a communication style out of my hat.
I had a leadership book club and we were reading all these standard leadership books and it was fine, but we were kind of bored with it. So we wound up reading The Sphere. I think it's Stephen King, right? And we broke down the different leadership styles that we saw in The Sphere, the novel. So I think there's all kinds of different ways you could do it.
Okay, thanks.
And I think the movie and book Ender's Game gives some real interesting perspectives on leadership.
Yeah. Trish has her hand up, so.
Yeah.
Somebody stole my Star Trek, my Star Trek approach. I am a Star Trek geek. And so I brought one of the leadership style speeches, because again, you do repeat, them. It's like doing icebreakers. I love redoing an icebreaker. I always try to reveal something about myself that the group doesn't know. That's always my, challenge. But I brought in all the Star Trek captains, all my figures of the Star Trek captains, and, talked about all the different leadership styles, and then use that to make an interactive discussion around what leadership style do you think you are most like, and then revealed what I thought my leadership style was. So try to make it maybe a journey that can be enjoyed by your audience as well as by you. There's another way.
And I see Karen's got her hand up.
Trinity.
That's a tertiary trainer. Tertiary. Word of the day. This is a very experienced group of Toastmasters in the room tonight, but I wanted to make sure we pulled out, just in case there's one or two people that wasn't aware, that you can actually do the icebreaker project before even signing up for a path. Is that something everybody's familiar with? Does anybody need to see where that is? Okay, great. Keith, do you want to drive or shall I?
Go for it.
Driving, I will go. Driving, I will go. Hi ho, the Dario.
In my car.
Driving, I will go.
Turn on my radio.
All right, so Toastmasters International, I am logged in. You do not need to be logged in for this. In fact, I'm going to log out. That's one of the beautiful things about this, is that it's that try it before you buy it. So you have somebody who's been a guest and they want to see what this Pathways is about, how do the curriculum work, what is the educational program, what does it even look like? So again, you're going to go to the educational programs button. And again, I am not logged in right now. This is available to everybody. There might be a better way to get there, but this is how I get there. I go to Pathways, and then right here you have your sample, your first project. So your prospective member can come right on here and break the ice, and it will actually take them through the e-learning, through the online training, step by step, click by click, just like everything else. And they can view what that looks like, get all the same materials, just like Pathways does, but do this before they even choose their path. So if you have somebody who's trying to decide between effective coaching and dynamic leadership, but they want to give their first speech, this is another option for that as well. The only caveat with this is that it does not record on the Pathways transcripts. So once they do choose that path, they will have to click through the icebreaker just to get that, complete that project done on the transcript itself.
Thanks, Karen. I did not know there was a buy it before or try it before you buy it option. So that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. That is certainly new to me. I just usually buy it and, I'm that guy. So Trish, I see you have your hand up. And just before I hand the lectern over to you, I remember your speech. So it's important to know that when you tied in Star Trek, I heard that. You presented that. So know this, that, the things we do impact and bring memories to people for a long time. And I didn't connect the dots until you brought it up, but I clearly remember that leadership one. So go ahead, Trish.
You got me. You surprised me with that one, but thank you. I haven't heard anybody mention, and I don't want anybody to miss this as an oversight, letters to managers. Remember, we always did that with the traditional, with the legacy program. You can still do that with Pathways. I do a lot of coaching inside our organization. I work for a financial institution, and I coach Toastmasters a lot within the organization. I always encourage them to take the send a letter to your manager option anytime they're achieving awards, and that can begin with level 3 awards and higher. So it can be done in Pathways as well as it was done in the legacy program. And don't ever miss the opportunity to have a member of yours get recognition through their professional career as well. that can sometimes be the difference between getting a promotion and not. So let's not overlook that for our members.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a great point. Share that with your company, and they do it for you, right? They send the email. So it's just a great function of that. We are at time, but we got a couple of housekeeping, very important things that we want to talk about. And again, we'll stay on after for those who want to hang on, but your time is very valuable. There is a survey, and it's been sent out as a link in the chat. It is also in the agenda. That is for this free training. Your payment to us would be your feedback. We take the feedback. We did it during the COTs and during our other trainings, and we applied them as the other COTs went on, and we're going to apply them to other trainings. So this is the same thing. Please answer the survey. Your feedback is as important as any evaluation and any speech. It makes us better. We're applying it. We need to hear it. We need to hear your feedback, good and bad. How can we improve this? We want your feedback. I don't know if I've asked everybody for their feedback yet, but if I haven't, I'm asking for it now. Please go ahead and click that link. You know, I've been on a couple of trainings outside of Toastmasters where you could not get the credit for the training. It was a lean training until you turned in the survey. And because lean construction is all about continuous improvement. And I thought, you know what, we should do that. Maybe we'll consider doing that. So let's leave with that feedback. A couple of things, just kind of rounding everything up. You know, we started with the first steps, and we ended with some tips and techniques, and we gave opportunities for questions. So hopefully you have left here today with one thing. And if you can remember one thing, I'd like everybody before we log out of here to write that one thing that you picked up into the chat for us. And then finally, I have to thank first our primary trainer, Neo, and there's some that may know that reference to the Matrix. We have our primary trainer, we have our self-named tertiary trainer as well. And I am just merely the guy that talks a lot. We appreciate everybody coming. Hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you enjoyed this and that you walked away with one thing. I haven't seen one thing pop up. Oh, I did. Thank you, Gene. One thing that you picked up from this training, and that's what we have for you today. So again, thanks to our trainers, Keith and Karen, for taking the time. And for everyone else, again, the experienced Toastmasters that are here, that's what these trainings do as well, too, because you have from beginners to I don't know how many, I lost numbers on your pathways, Keith. Keith is 173 years old. I don't know if anybody knows that. He looks really young. He eats well. That must be what it is. But there are so much experience within this room. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to help each other grow. And, you know, even if I've walked into trainings where I didn't know anything and I helped somebody because of the questions that you ask and how you learn. So we've done it today. Thanks so much for your time. And we'll continue the meeting after, but everybody is welcome to hang around for the after party. There's no drinks and we didn't have any money for snacks, but all we have is some great conversation. So thanks everybody. Have a great night.